recording. Okay. Then there's that camera right there. We're gonna see if that we're just gonna see if that one's worth using at all. Hey folks, we are post Iowa, post New Hampshire, post Nevada, and guess what? Bernie Sanders fucking won each state. Nevada by a landslide, and that's because of the Black and Latinx vote. So to all those people who are complaining about having a real state with real diversity, there you go. So can't wait to see Sanders just take the nomination. Thank you for joining me here in my little corner of the Psychic Dolphin Garage. History with a Porpoise. This month is Black History Month, so I decided to do a Black-centric topic today. The Black Panther Party. So we're going to go over a brief history of the Black Panthers. Who were the Black Panthers? Well, it was a group founded by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale in 1968 in Oakland, California. It was initially intended as a way of defending minorities in the local community from police brutality. They did this by arming members and making them politically aware. According to the Marxist Archive, this organization held to a unique mix of revolutionary ideas, and it was in the forefront of the US revolutionary working class struggle. Also, according to them, the Black Panthers began where some of the ideas of Malcolm X left off, and as time progressed, incorporated some Marxist and Maoist ideology. On April 25 of 1967, the first issue of the Black Panther, the party's official newsletter, was published. In June of that year, the party marched into Sacramento, armed in protest of then Governor Ronald Reagan's attempt to outlaw open carry in the state. This protest and later the arrests of the protesters helped to spark the initiation of new chapters of the Black Panther Party outside of California. In October of that year, Huey Newton was, my notes say that he was arrested for butchering a pig. Folks, that's not illegal. Oh. He was arrested for killing a cop. My bad. Fellow Panther Eldridge Cleaver began a Free Huey movement while the party continued to expand. Stokely Carmichael, the former chair of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and national figure supporting the Black Power movement, became the party's first prime minister in February of 1968. Carmichael is known for his refusal to allow white people into the Black Power movement.
Whites who come into the black community with ideas of change seem to want to absolve the power structure of its responsibility for what it's doing, and say that change can only come through black unity, which is the worst kind of paternalism. If we are to proceed towards true liberation, we must cut ourselves off from white people. Otherwise, we find ourselves in the tentacles of the white power complex that controls this country.
1968 is the year when reading became mandatory in the Black Panther Party, specifically Mao's Red Book. This is also the year that J. Edgar Hoover, who I've now mentioned in 2 videos, began COINTELPRO investigations into the Black Panther Party. COINTELPRO is the abbreviation for Counterintelligence Program. It was launched by the FBI in 1956 in order to infiltrate and break up any subversive groups. This included feminist groups, the Communist Party USA, anti-Vietnam War protesters, an organization behind that, Martin Luther King Jr. and his organizers, the Nation of Islam, animal rights movements, the environmentalist movement, the American Indian movement, Puerto Rican independence movements, and so on and so forth. What's unfortunate is that the FBI's efforts to tear apart the party were pretty successful. On April 6, 1968, in West Oakland, a 17-year-old black boy named Bobby Hutton was shot dead by the Oakland police. In the 90-minute bullet storm, Hutton was unarmed and was shot 10 times. He was forced out of his home, which was mysteriously set ablaze afterwards. Just 2 days earlier, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. This was shortly after he began to rethink his policy of nonviolence and began to build relationships with more radical and violent groups. 2 days after the assassination of Hutton, Bobby Kennedy, seen as one of the few politicians who was sympathetic to the civil rights movement, was also assassinated. In 1968, the Black Panthers launched the Panthers Free Breakfast for School Children program at St. Augustine Church in Oakland. By the end of that year, Panthers across the US set up kitchens feeding over 10,000 children every day before school. In response to this, J. Edgar Hoover released this memo to the FBI.
The Breakfast for Children program, BCP, has been instituted by the Black Panther Party in several cities to provide a stable breakfast for ghetto children. The program has met with some success and has resulted in considerable favorable publicity for the Black Panther Party. The resulting publicity tends to portray the Black Panther Party in a favorable light and clouds the violent nature of the group and its ultimate aim of insurrection. The BCP promotes at least tacit support for the Black Panther Party among naive individuals, and, what is more distressing, provides the Black Panther Party with a ready audience composed of highly impressionable youths. Consequently, the BCP represents the best and most influential activity going for the Black Panther Party and, as such, is potentially the greatest threat to efforts by authorities to neutralize the Black Panther Party and destroy what it stands for.
10,000 kids with food in their bellies, the greatest threat to America, not like the expansion of nuclear arms at the time. God, what a fucking awful queen. I'm glad that bitch is dead. Fucking hate that bitch. In Chicago, Panther leader Fred Hampton led 5 different breakfast programs and even helped create a free medical center and door-to-door medical services. He also encouraged blood donations to tackle the issue of sickle cell anemia in the Black community. The Chicago Party also reached out to gangs to turn them away from a life of crime and instead take up arms in the class war. Gotta love it. Sadly, Hampton was assassinated in cold blood on December 4, 1969, thanks to an informant. At 4 a.m., the FBI raided Hampton's apartment in Chicago and shot him twice in the head and once in the arm. Mark Clark, another Panther who was sleeping in the living room of Hampton's apartment, was also murdered. Hampton's pregnant wife was also shot, though she did survive. 4 other Panthers were wounded in the raid, and 1 escaped. All of the surviving Panthers were arrested for aggravated assault and attempted murder of the police, while the cops spent absolutely no time in jail. It's great to know that, some things never change. Fuck them. Despite previous complaints about gender and representation in the party, in 1969, the party leadership moved toward a more egalitarian outlook when it came to gender. Women were not sought after to join the party initially, and they were expected to stand behind their man. Ugh, yikes. The Black Panther newsletter declared men and women were created equal in 1969. Going forward, women such as Kathleen Cleaver, Angela Davis, and Erica Huggins were exemplified in the party as revolutionaries. Things were not all that great, though, in 1969, and they kind of fell pretty rapidly after that. A rift began to grow between the Panthers and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee over the inclusion of white people in the struggle for minority rights, resulting in a gunfight on the campus of UCLA. In September of that year, Huey Newton was convicted of voluntary manslaughter and sentenced to 2 to 15 years in prison, though it was appealed and overturned the following year. On November 24 of that year, Kathleen and Eldridge Cleaver fled the US, eventually settling in Algeria. And in 1969, Bobby Seale was indicted in Chicago for protesting at the DNC the previous year, and when he was arrested, he was refused the choice of a lawyer. His protests of a denial of counsel resulted in him being held in contempt of court and was sentenced to 4 years. While he was in jail, he would then be charged with the murder of a cop. That trial would result in a hung jury. Also while in jail, Seale published Seize the Time, which is a history of the Black Panthers as well as a biography of Huey Newton. Many more arrests and convictions of Panthers across the US would happen throughout that year. However, the party did still grow, and by 1971, the Panthers paper reached 250,000 copies in circulation. When Newton was released from prison, he shifted his efforts to develop the social programs that the Panthers had set up even further, expanding the breakfast program and the healthcare programs, as well as helping develop a housing program. In March of 1970, the FBI ramped up their efforts to destroy the party by sowing seeds of distrust amongst the party leaders with forged letters. They began to send Eldridge Cleaver forged letters while he was still in Algeria. These letters were allegedly from members at all levels of the party, and even from people outside of the party who were part of other radical groups. These letters were all in a very similar vein, showing distrust and skepticism in things like the breakfast programs and Newton's leadership abilities. The split definitely happened when Newton went on a TV talk show for an interview, and Cleaver called into the show to express his disdain for what had happened to the party. Cleaver was then expelled from the Central Committee, and then he began his own program, the Black Liberation Army. In 1973, Bobby Seale would run for mayor of Oakland and get 40% of the votes, though he would lose the race. Disillusioned, Newton would then step down as party leader. He became increasingly depressed, and he eventually turned to cocaine. It's suspected that he may have been introduced to cocaine by the FBI, but this can't really be corroborated. He continued to become increasingly dependent on cocaine and would often go on incoherent rambles talking about killing himself by reactionary suicide. He unfortunately died on August 22 of 1989 by a gunshot wound over a drug dispute. Bobby Seale also resigned from the party, and leadership was passed to Elaine Brown, who continued the social programs. The 1980s saw the destruction of the party. Rank and file members were hunted down and arrested, and the leadership was left in shambles. Many members were imprisoned on trumped-up charges, or, as in the case of Assata Shakur, they were forced to flee the United States. And that is unfortunately the short history of the original Black Panther Party. If you'd like to know more, you can actually go onto the Marxist archive to find more information. That's literally where I went to get all of this stuff. This part isn't on my script, so I'm gonna have to ad-lib it a little bit. I'd like to thank Psychic Dolphin Garage, not just for being Patreon donors, but allowing me to be on their show. Thank you all very much. Love you boys. I also want to give a really big shout out to Minion Death Cult, both Tony and Alexander, who helped me out with the voiceovers in this video. Those two are the hottest boys on hashtag Hot Boys for Bernie, so you really need to go check them out and their podcast, Minion Death Cult. I'd like to thank my donors, Andres, Abby, Nicholas, and cool kid Jorge. Jorge is a cool kid and gets a little devil drawing of himself because he donates at the $6.66 level. You can learn more about that perk and all of my other perks by going to my Patreon. The link is in the description. I would really appreciate if you could become a sustaining donor. If you can't afford a sustaining donation, I totally understand that, but please consider then a one-time donation with coffee. Link is also in the description. And again, if that is still too much to ask, and I 100% understand because I'm broke as fuck too, you can go ahead and like the video, share the video, and subscribe to Psychic Dolphin Garage. Also, please check out the podcast, Psychic Dolphin Garage. Lots of wonderful stuff happening on over there. So that'll be it for today. I haven't much else to say except for fight the power. Take care. And goodbye.